Content warning. This video discusses several upsetting topics including SA, death, homophobia and transphobia, the Holocaust, anti-Semitic sentiments, anti-vax sentiments, discussions of birth complications, and general nastiness. And also a disclaimer before I start this video and the clips shown within it fall under fair use, and any attempt to remove this video citing a lack of fair use would be against YouTube's guidelines and an abuse of its fair use system. Likewise, any privacy claims would also be against YouTube's guidelines, as the person covered in this video is a public person with multiple podcasts, Instagram pages, and a YouTube channel, all of which are public. All opinions stated in this video are my own and are not strictly factual. They are simply my opinions. So first of all, happy Halloween. I hope you are all happy and safe this year, whether you celebrate Halloween or not. If not, I hope you are having a good Monday at least. This video is somewhat of a coincidence, actually. I wasn't planning on making this video on Halloween, and this video is about a practicing witch, so there is kind of an accidental theme going on here. But anyways, this is a truly bizarre mini deep dive into one of Monat's more infamous distributors, so prepare yourself. To put credit where credit is due, I initially got inspired to do this video after seeing Nikki from Small Anti-MLM Angel on Instagram post multiple videos of this person, as well as covering her on her Grifters podcast. Also, I'm going into this video assuming that you know what multi-level marketing and also Monat is, and if you don't, then you might want to look into it because this video isn't all that much about MLMs. It's more of a character study, but it's worth it for the context. So, Angela Faith Sumner is a conservative and a witch, and an active sales rep for Monat, the hair care and supplement MLM. The reason I referred to her as infamous earlier is because her posts and videos have been shared around various corners of the internet, especially anti-MLM corners on Reddit and Instagram, because of her extreme beliefs and opinions, which I'll be discussing today. On Angela's website, she claims she can teach women to reach their fullest potential. However, after reviewing her content, I have to say I haven't found any evidence of this. While I do pride myself in my research, I was not dedicated enough to subscribe to her emails or her membership, but I did watch several of her YouTube videos, podcast episodes, and dug up some interesting and disturbing information. She posts most frequently on Instagram, where she has, as of this video's recording, about 15,000 followers. Her videos typically get around 3,000 views, and her comments are always limited. And there's a reason for this. You see, Angela frequently posts pretty controversial stuff, including, but not limited to, fatphobia, transphobia, anti-vax sentiments, and occasional tirades against us haters over here at the anti-MLM community. Fun stuff. A trait she has often displayed on her Instagram is gatekeeping, especially when it comes to witchcraft. Like I mentioned before, Angela is a practicing witch, something I find mildly odd considering Monat is a majority Christian company. I'm not entirely sure which facet of witchcraft she practices, but I've at least ruled out Wicca because she believes in a single god, while Wicca is, from what I know, polytheistic. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. She has before stated that real witches shouldn't get vaccines or other forms of modern medicine, saying, quote, "Run away from any healer who takes medicine from man and not planet Earth," which is interesting because modern medicine is literally from planet Earth. Not to say that vaccines grow on trees or anything, but their ingredients did not pop out of thin air. They also came from the Earth. It's just that some chemicals were separated from their original, natural form. And besides, the data has shown for decades that vaccines prevent and lessen symptoms of illnesses, and in some cases have caused viruses to completely die out. You don't hear much about smallpox or polio anymore, and Angela can thank vaccines for that. Like many other anti-vaxxers and COVID downplayers, she has expressed some pretty anti-Semitic sentiments in the past, comparing vaccine mandates to the Holocaust of all things.
I've made the decision that I'm not ever putting a face diaper on ever again, for any reason, ever again, period. And I've made that decision because I truly believe that what has happened over the last 2 years is the biggest crimes against humanity that humans have ever seen. Now, you might be like, what about the Holocaust? And I think this is worse. Now, before you get your panties in a bunch, hear me out. Anytime Obviously, anytime there's a mass genocide against a group of people, it's atrocious. Like, I'm a witch. I fully understand. Okay. However, what they've managed to do over the last 2 years is brainwash the entire world into believing that a lab created thing is jumping around and triple, face diapers, rubber gloves. Like, people think that they're going to just drop dead when there's a 99.9% survival rate, unless you're obese or have other comorbidities.
Besides the obvious downplaying of a horrific historical event, this comparison is honestly so flawed I can hardly comprehend the fact that a woman almost twice my age has made it. You can talk about how vaccine mandates are wrong until the cows come home and you're blue in the face, but here's the thing. At least it's backed by science, and whether you agree or not, it's suggested to benefit everyone's health, whether you believe it's right or wrong. Nazis' beliefs were not based in science. They were based on the purely mythological belief that ethnic Germans and Austrians were superior to other ethnicities, and while attempting to make this so, they performed the calculated tortures and murders of millions of Jews, Romani, Slavs, Poles, LGBTQ, the disabled, and anyone who they deemed lesser than. Not a fair comparison, or a remotely logical one. I find it funny in the video that she claims she understands the struggles of Jewish people because she's a witch, and witches have also been historically persecuted. But allow me to pop in and say, those who survived witch trials here in America or in Europe are absolutely dead. There haven't been witch trials here in the United States in the past 130 years. There are still survivors of the Holocaust to this day who are still grappling with the unimaginable trauma of what they witnessed. So many families of these survivors carry this generational trauma with them. And I say this as a person whose ancestors were hung in Salem in 1692 and 1693. I don't have any generational trauma from that, because it was hundreds upon hundreds of years ago, and neither do other people who share my ancestry. And I do understand that witchcraft does still hold a stigma to this day. There's no denying that, of course. But I don't think that comparing something that you have not personally experienced, like being waterboarded during witch interrogations, to something that many people have experienced who are still alive today. It's also worth mentioning that Angela is currently pregnant and is planning on having an all-natural birth, which for her means absolutely no medical assistance, no doctors, no nurses, no checkups, no midwife, not even a doula, from what she has posted. Her reasoning for this is that women are, quote, built to give birth, and that having a doctor inspect her or her baby is sexual assault. I'm not even going to counteract this point because, Jesus Christ, a doctor checking to make sure that your baby is all right is not sexual assault because it is not sexual. There is nothing sexual about birth or inspections or checkups. What the fuck is wrong with you? Now, I don't know her exact age, but I've heard that she's around 38 or 39, meaning that she is at a higher risk for complications in her pregnancy and birth, which makes her refusal to have any kind of checkups or assistance, even from a non-doctor like a midwife, pretty concerning, and I'm honestly kind of worried for her and for her baby. Angela also has a podcast called Mind Your Business Money Witch, and I'm gonna admit her episodes are not high quality. In fact, they're pretty bad. And this is coming from somebody who literally uses their earbuds for their microphone. Her podcast is essentially just re-uploads of her Instagram or YouTube live streams. There are moments where she's showing something to the camera or just silently reading comments, neither of which translate well in an audio format. Also, there was one I listened to where she was on a walk outside and the wind was just whipping around, making it pretty hard to listen to her talk. So besides the awful stuff that she said on this podcast, which I will get into, it's clear she didn't care enough to at least edit the audios of her live streams before making them into podcast episodes. I'm not sure whether she didn't think they needed editing or if she was just too lazy to bother, but either way, if she starts uploading on there again, which she hasn't since October of last year, here's to hoping that she gets a good mic and actually puts some effort into it. Now, onto the actual content of her podcast. In the episode, Trauma is an Expander in Your Life, Angela says what you do with your trauma informs your life. I actually agreed with this statement. Trauma can be detrimental to a person if it isn't worked through. However, she undermined this almost immediately by continuing to say that actually working on your trauma is pointless and that you should just power through it.
We all have trauma, but here is what I want you to understand. What you do with that trauma, informs your life. I can't fucking stand trauma-informed therapy, trauma-informed counseling, trauma-informed meditation, trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed eating. Fuck that. Fuck trauma-informed shit. I inform my trauma. I tell my trauma how it's gonna work in my life.
My issue here is her actively discouraging people from getting the help that they might need to overcome issues they have had in their life. Despite her own trauma, which she actually mentions in this podcast, she does not seem to have much compassion for other people's pain and struggles. Just recently, she made some Instagram stories on a similar topic where she claimed her neighbor came to her upset over something, and instead of offering advice or a listening ear, she made the situation about her, and basically asked this woman if ruining Angela's day made her feel better, adding that, quote, "This is why I don't have many friends." Another example of this attitude is in her episode Money and Manifestation, where she talks about how she and her fellow Monat girls have a group chat where they seemingly gaslight each other, and also describes some concerning behaviors she partook in while she self-isolated herself in the woods for some period of time a few years ago.
We are in Hypermind together, and I'm so excited you're in the round table. You're going to teach us so much. So make sure you join the Slack and have fun at the dentist. And I'll see you in we have our private Hypermind chat for women who just like constantly up level one another. And we're constantly asking, like, is it true? Is it true that this happened? Is it true that you're going through this? It's not that we don't love and support each other. It's like, we're not going to have a fucking sob story for one another. I'm not going to have a sob story for any of the women who are in my life. I will not participate in your sob story. I've been in poverty. I've been homeless. I didn't speak to my mother for several years. I will not participate in the sob story, because the only way that I got to where I am now is not allowing anyone to participate in my sob story. For me, that meant living in the woods where I literally couldn't talk to anyone to participate in my sob story. And so I wrote poetry. I just went through all these photos last night. I would go find dead animals and collect their bones and reassemble the animals back together. I would find lizards and I would skin them. I taught myself how to skin coyotes because I wanted to skin my dog, which I didn't, but I paid for her to get skinned because I don't do that anymore. I'm not about to skin a dog. Can pay somebody for that. But I taught myself. I took myself out of society to remove anyone's ideas of what I was.
But the Money Witch podcast is not her only podcast. She collaborated with Amber Rickert, a social worker and psychotherapist, to make Controversy Queens, which hasn't been updated since early February of this year. Angela is characteristically messy on this podcast, while Amber, who I disagreed with on lots of things, was more measured and reasonable. While listening to the episode Talk, they were discussing therapy, and it honestly felt more like Amber teaching Angela how therapy actually works and its benefits, instead of a simple discussion on the topic. In the episode, everyone's talking about natural law. At around the 10-minute mark, they discuss their homophobic and transphobic beliefs. Well, that might sound a little harsh to some people, but while their wording is kind of vague, it's certainly clear that they believe in clearly defined gender and sex roles, and frown upon more fluid forms of sexuality and gender expressions.
Biological sex, like biological sexual orientation, is a part of natural law. It is a part of our natural connection to God and to being human. And part of the reason we incarnated on this planet was to experience this drastic duality of masculine and feminine. And part of the agenda that's unfolding on the planet right now is to completely remove those identifying natural law markers, biological markers, and make us become this like amalgamation of like both genders, both sexes, gender fluid. Like that's part of the goal of the powers that be, is to take us away from this very intensely connected dualistic experience of being human, which again is the opposite of natural law, which is the man-made law, which is what we're kind of going through on the planet right now, is this perversion of what is good and what is right. It's a rewriting it's an attempt at rewriting natural law to benefit the current like world that we live in, but it ain't gonna work.
Right. I mean, we don't consent to that. And we, it takes time. Everybody has a different timeline for realizing that it's happening. But once you realize it, you can't unrealize it. You can't stick the toothpaste back in the tube. So here we are.
I find it so odd that between the two of them, a witch and a therapist, that they can't seem to grasp the huge variety of humans and each individual's experience in gender and sexuality. It's quite strange that two people who ought to be knowledgeable about the human experience can't understand that not everyone can fit into their boxes of either traditionally masculine or traditionally feminine. They attempt to clarify afterwards that they aren't anti-trans, but that they just think that they shouldn't have a large platform because they make up a small percentage of a population. But who benefits from the silence of trans people? Certainly not trans people. They deserve what little platforms they currently have to just speak on their experience and to just live their lives without people debating on whether or not they exist or if they should have platforms or not. Angela also has a YouTube channel where she is seemingly also inactive at the moment. I watched some of her videos and quickly realized that most of them are also re-uploaded Instagram and YouTube live streams. Some of them are literally the audio versions, the video versions of some of her Money Witch podcast episodes, and unfortunately their quality is not much better in video form either.
Marrying those two and then repeating it. Finding your formula for magic, your formula for success, your formula for wealth.
However, this is not the last I found of Angela. She had a podcast from 2018, the Hyperdimensional Human podcast, which hasn't been updated since October of 2018. From this discovery, I'm mostly just highlighting one episode because honestly, it's the most disturbing out of everything I've already covered. It's the last episode, entitled On Death for Halloween, where Angela discusses how, on Halloween of 2017, a woman died at a gathering that she hosted. From her very vague description of events, it sounded like the woman did not die from natural causes because Angela mentioned being questioned by the police and the police being involved in general. I attempted to do further research on this, but search engine results didn't bring up anything about it except one Reddit thread that, while interesting, was full of personal alleged experiences that can't be proved. Because I don't know how or why this woman died, I won't speculate any further on it, and I encourage you to do the same in the comments, purely out of respect for her. But in this podcast, she discusses her very odd out there beliefs and uses them to excuse and brush over this person dying in a place where she was responsible for keeping them safe.
You may or may not know that at my gathering last year, the only gathering I've ever organized and orchestrated and held, a woman died. She died on Halloween, which is also known as Samhain. So she died on that day, the second day of the gathering. Singular thing that I know to be true, which is that we come as humans, and before we come, we choose every single aspect of our entire life And then, of course, when we get here, we get to play around with those specifics. But we choose our entire experience, our entire life. We choose the family we're born into, the exact location. We choose our name. Your parents didn't choose your name. You told them your name. We choose every part of our life because I believe that every single thing that we do and experience is a choice, including death. And this is the medicine of the Phoenix. It's everything is going to die. So as I'm sitting at the hot springs, the owner comes over and he told me a story about one of the officers or attorneys or whatever who was trying to make a death someone's fault. And while I had been interviewed by this human and while I was interrogated just like some of the other women who were at the gathering, I have shared, and I will again, that a lot of the human laws and rules and things don't make sense. So when I said, yeah, I think she chose her death, I didn't mean that she committed suicide. I meant that she chose her death long before she came, before she even came as a human. And then one of the other women said, Angela, maybe you should just not talk. And I thought, okay, that's probably a good idea. And then I remembered that my cousin is a DA, and I thought maybe I should give her a call and see what she thinks about a woman dying at my gathering. It's also hilarious and complicated and awful and heartbreaking and hilarious.
So this video is a lot darker than my usual lighthearted Reddit reading stuff, but I felt that this was important to highlight because Monat is very aware of this person. She has won awards at events, she has a large following, and yet she has posted all of these frankly disgusting things very publicly. Several people have reported her to Monat after her anti-mask rant went the rounds on Twitter and TikTok, and yet she's still allowed at events and is an active participant in the company. So this goes out to anyone who might be contemplating joining Monat. Is a company that allows one of their representatives to act in this way one that you want to be a part of? Angela is such a confusing person to me. A walking contradiction, really. A conservative witch, an uncompassionate life coach, someone who told her audience once in her old podcast, the Hyperdimensional Human podcast, to give all their clothes to charity, now promotes an industry where she makes money off of others going broke. She seemingly wants to live the simple life, but is also trying to become a millionaire. She promotes a lifestyle of being one at nature while promoting a business that requires you to be on your phone or your computer for most of the day. She talks about being a peaceful, loving person, but displays the exact opposite in almost every respect of the life that she has shared online. Now, I can't claim to know Angela, of course. After all, I can only glean so much from what she decides to share of her life on social media, which is not the full picture of who she is and what her real life is actually like. But I do think that it's concerning that someone who has displayed such disturbing behavior as her has such a large platform online. Well, like I said, that was really heavy. So here's a picture of one of my cats as a palate cleanser. I hope that you guys have had a great October, and I hope that you enjoyed this video or at least found it interesting. You can subscribe if you want to. If you don't, that's cool. You can like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it, leave a comment if you have any thoughts, and hopefully this video doesn't go missing in a couple weeks because if this video gets taken down, I shall be pissed. This might be a discussion in my next therapy session, so that'll be interesting. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great Halloween, or Monday if you don't celebrate Halloween. Either way, I hope you all have a great day. I'll see you in the next video, hopefully. Peace out. Goodbye.